1975. This is where the plot thickens. While the previous 2 years had seen the end of a war and given a crooked commander-in-chief the boot, the midpoint of the 1970s presented an uncertain future. A few governments changed hands, the US and the UK experienced historic tragedies, and some people really had it in for Gerald Ford. But 1975 had some pretty thrilling high points. 2 iconic gladiators faced off for the final time. America's favorite stuntman bounced back from a brush with death to accomplish the impossible. And the summer blockbuster was created by a rubber shark and 2 notes on a piano. We're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 70s. This is Timeline. Get ready to take the Pepsi challenge because this episode is all about 1975. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what 70s movie you think needs a remake. Now, you're gonna need a bigger boat for this one. This is 1975. The year kicked off with a crowd of over 2,000 Led Zeppelin fans getting the let out at Boston Gardens, where a riot broke out in the early morning hours of January 6th. The throng of Leadheads had gathered the night before to try to score some tickets to an upcoming Zeppelin concert the moment they went on sale. But the crowd became agitated and broke into the arena around midnight and trashed the place. The mob was calmed when the decision was made to open the box office and begin slinging Zeppelin tickets. But by then, the damage had been done. $50,000 worth to be exact. That's enough to buy several stairways to heaven.
Let's take a look at our Wheel of Fortune. Top dollar value on the wheel for the first round is $500. Look out for this black space bankrupt, because if you hit it, you lose all your cash, but not your merchandise, because once you buy a prize, it's yours to keep forever.
Yeah, they must be real rich.
Hold it, Diane. We are the Jeffersons.
Are you right, Louis? He's a great joker.
Hey, Barn, I think he's stoned.
Stone? What are you talking about?
Hey, what do you say we guys go down to the beach and shoot some clams?
Comedy legend Larry Fine, better known as Larry of the Three Stooges, departed for the slapstick stage in the sky on the 24th. Fine wouldn't be the only stooge we'd lose in 75. More on that later in the year. A Hungarian-born college professor named Erno Rubik applied for a patent for his magic cube on January 30th. Originally designed as an exercise for his interior design students, Rubik's 3-dimensional puzzle would become one of the most popular brain teasers in pop culture history, the Rubik's Cube. Hey, 80s! March saw some major geopolitical shakeups. The military government of Ethiopia abolished its monarchy on the 21st, beginning a 17-year period of Marxist rule. The Derg, the junta that had seized control of Ethiopia in a coup the previous September, was an ally of the Soviet Union and would lead the East African country into an extreme famine in the 1980s, brought on by historic droughts and war with Somalia. 4 days later, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia was abolished from the planet by his nephew, Prince Faisal bin Musaid, whose motives remain unknown to this day. The king was fatally shot during a royal audience with the prince, who had just returned from a visit to the United States. And although he was initially declared insane, the prince was convicted of regicide and publicly executed 3 months later.
He's a pinball wizard, there has to be a twist. A pinball wizard got such a wrist.
Once in a lifetime, there comes a motion picture which changes the whole history of motion pictures.
Amusement park caricature sprung to life, Bill Gates made the first steps toward becoming a gazillionaire when he founded Microsoft with Paul Allen on April 4th in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Oddly, Albuquerque might have ceased to exist were it not for the spell check feature in Microsoft Office. At the time, Gates, a student at Harvard University, and Allen, a computer programmer from Boston, intended to produce software for the Altair 8800 personal computer, but the company grew way beyond those modest goals. Flash forward 12 years later to 1987, when the 31-year-old Gates became the world's youngest billionaire after Microsoft went public in 1985. If they could only make an internet browser that works. Back to 75, where on April 8th, Frank Robinson took the field as Major League Baseball's first black manager during a game against the New York Yankees. Robinson also played in that game, hitting a home run on his first at-bat in Cleveland's 5-3 victory. Pretty groovy day for Robinson.
We'll be right back.
Now you can play the Evel Knievel stunt game right at home. There are 6 exciting Evel Knievel stunts, like stop Evel's cycle before it hits the barrels. Make Evel stop on the ramp. Not that time.
Sticking with baseball, the San Diego Chicken made his first appearance at a Padres game the next day. The Chicken, portrayed by Ted Yanolas, was initially conceived as a mascot for the local radio station, but Yanolas began attending Padres games in the costume and turned the character into a sports icon. Although he slowed down some in recent years, the San Diego Chicken still makes public appearances to this day. Ironically, the Chicken made his debut the same day former McDonald's CEO and then Padres owner Ray Kroc infamously took control of the broadcasting booth in the middle of the game and began ranting to fans about his team's poor performance. Just over a week later, the alliterative dictator Pol Pot took control of Cambodia when his Khmer Rouge guerrilla army seized the capital city of Phnom Penh, bringing an end to the Cambodian Civil War on April 17th. Pol Pot instituted one of the most notoriously cruel regimes in modern history, outlawing virtually all forms of expression, taking children from their families and conscripting them into military service, and sentencing any citizens he deemed undesirable to work camps and prisons, where they were fatally starved and tortured. Pol Pot would remain in power until he was deposed and imprisoned by his own followers on June 12, 1997. Pol Pot spent the rest of his life under house arrest and succumbed to heart failure a year later. The West German embassy in Stockholm, Sweden was bombed by the left-wing Red Army faction on the 25th of April. The guerrillas seized control of the embassy to demand the release of some 24 anarchist prisoners, but the situation quickly escalated, resulting in the demise of 2 hostages and one of the captors. One of the more unforgettable images of the 20th century was captured 4 days later during the fall of Saigon.
The city of Saigon was renamed today. The victorious communists who forced the city's surrender said the capital of South Vietnam henceforth will be known as Ho Chi Minh City.
The United States officially ended its occupation of South Vietnam on April 29th, closing the U.S. Embassy for the final time and evacuating all remaining American personnel via helicopter. But South Vietnamese citizens, desperate to escape before the North Vietnamese army took control, began flooding the compound to try and board the helicopters. Ultimately, a total of 81 helicopters evacuated 1,373 Americans and 5,595 Vietnamese over the course of 19 hours. An additional 65,000 South Vietnamese citizens fled the city in boats, barges, rafts, and sampans to reach the U.S. warships floating just off the coast. Moving into the summer, Moe Howard, the last living member of the Three Stooges and the comedy trio's de facto leader, yucked his last yuck on May the 4th. Oh, and on Star Wars Day, too. Bummer. At least it wasn't a thing at that point. Or now, really. It's not an actual event, you guys. It's a self-generated marketing event. 6 days later, Sony unveiled its new Betamax recorder in Japan. Beta was the first home video format, allowing consumers to record broadcasts or watch pre-packaged movies in their own living rooms. It hit the stores in the United States that November, but the excitement over Betamax would be short-lived, as it was quickly overshadowed by the debut of the VHS format the following year. The next day, R&B singer Natalie Cole released her debut album, Inseparable. Cole already had bona fides as a crooner. She was the daughter of legendary vocalist Nat King Cole. But the release of Inseparable made her a star in her own right, selling over 1 million copies and earning her 2 Grammy Awards. Speaking of hits, Glenn Campbell released his hit single, Rhinestone Cowboy, 2 weeks later on May 26th. Rhinestone hit the top spot on both the Billboard Hot 100 and Hot Country Songs chart, the first country song to do so since Jimmy Dean's 1961 hit, Big Bad John. I'm a rhinestone cowboy, and now it's stuck in your head. You're welcome. That same day, Evel Knievel, the most famous daredevil to have ever lived, had a brush with death when he got into a frightening crash while performing a stunt in London's Wembley Stadium. Knievel was attempting to jump 13 buses on his motorcycle when he wiped out, breaking his hand and fracturing 2 vertebrae and his pelvis. Pelvis? Yeah, you can break that. The crash left him so shaken that he told the audience he would never attempt another jump.
That you are the last people in the world who will ever see me jump, because I will never, ever, ever jump again. I'm through.
But he changed his mind pretty quickly. More on that later in the year. 1 day later, the UK suffered its worst motor vehicle disaster in history when a bus loaded with passengers fell off the Dibbles Bridge. The bus landed upside down and was nearly flattened by the plunge, which fatally injured 33 people on board. Another motor vehicle tragedy struck 3 days later when American Olympic long-distance runner Steve Prefontaine drove his car off the road near his house in Eugene, Oregon, in the early morning hours of May 30th. Prefontaine was just 24 years old at the time of his fatal accident and had been training to compete in the 1976 Olympics.
We'll be right back.
Ask any mermaid you happen to see, what's the best tuna chicken of the sea?
June kicked off with a more peaceful development when Egyptian President Anwar Sadat reopened the Suez Canal on the 5th of the month. The canal, an important shipping lane between the Persian Gulf and Europe, had been closed 8 years earlier in 1967 during the Six-Day War in response to Israel's occupation of the Sinai Peninsula. Today, roughly 300 million tons of goods travel through the Suez Canal each year. That is a lot of 8 tracks.
Anyway.
Hey.
Mom.
I'm gonna get you some lemonade. Oh, you're fine, darling, fine. It's the microphone. Give me the mic.
I ain't done.
Oh, I know.
I ain't done.
Go get some glass of water. Come on, boys, help her off, all right? You'll come back, okay, darling?
Thank you.
Notorious mob boss Sam Giancana was whacked in his home on June 19th. The hit took place the night before Giancana was set to testify before Congress about the mafia's involvement with the CIA in plans to assassinate Fidel Castro. To this day, Giancana's murder remains unsolved.
I don't want no volunteers. I don't want no mates. There's too many captains on this island. $10,000 for me by myself. For that, you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Theatrical shock rock singer Alice Cooper took a tumble off the stage during a concert in Vancouver on the 23rd of June. Cooper, known for his elaborate performances, tripped over a prop during the first song of the night and crashed headfirst through the security barriers on the floor below, breaking 6 of his ribs and nabbing a pretty gnarly concussion. After being told the extent of his injuries, the singer went back out and performed a few more songs, presumably far, far away from the edge of the stage. A much more tragic crash occurred a day later, when Eastern Airlines Flight 66 crashed on approach to New York's JFK Airport on June 24th. The aircraft was thrown off course by strong winds and struck several light towers before impacting on Rockaway Boulevard. 113 of the 124 people on board perished, making it the worst accident in American aviation history at the time. Twilight Zone creator Rod Serling departed for a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind on the 28th of June. Serling's endlessly imitable persona and incisive social commentary made The Twilight Zone a hit, and it remains the benchmark for popular science fiction to this day. That unforgettably trippy theme song doesn't hurt either. Moving into July, tennis icon Arthur Ashe became the first black player to win Wimbledon, the day after Independence Day. The 31-year-old Ashe triumphed over the heavily favored Jimmy Connors, who was both the defending champion and 9 years Ashe's junior. Ashe would retire from competition 5 years later after suffering a heart attack and became an HIV and AIDS activist after contracting the virus from a blood transfusion following bypass surgery. Ashe passed away in 1993. Famed labor leader Jimmy Hoffa disappeared off the face of the earth on July 20th from the parking lot of a diner in Detroit, Michigan. Hoffa had been the president of the Teamsters Union since 1957 and had become a hugely influential figure in the American labor movement, advocating for workers' rights right up until the day of his disappearance. He also had well-known ties with organized crime, which resulted in him spending several years in prison for bribery. Although Hoffa's fate remains officially unsolved, it hasn't stopped Hollywood from making a bunch of movies about his demise. Italian fashion designer Giorgio Armani founded his eponymous company in Milan, Italy 4 days later with his partner, Sergio Gagliotti. Fashion House has since become synonymous with trend-setting red carpet fashion and is still generating billions of dollars of annual revenue almost 50 years later. Near the end of July, Gerald Ford became the first U.S. president to visit Auschwitz. Ford solemnly paid his respects at the memorial to the 4 million victims of the notorious concentration camp in Poland, while on his way to a multi-nation peace conference in Helsinki, Finland. Led Zeppelin frontman Robert Plant was seriously injured in a car crash in Rhodes, Greece on the 4th of August. The singer had been vacationing with his family while on a short break from touring when he lost control of their rental car and drove off the road. Although his family wasn't seriously injured, Plant suffered a broken elbow and ankle, forcing Led Zeppelin to cancel the rest of their tour and pushing back the release date of their next album by a full year. Well, Zeppelin, good times, bad times, you know they've had their share.
But tonight is the night that my beautiful creature is destined to be born!
Gerald Ford endured the first of 2 attempts on his life when former Charles Manson follower Lynette Squeaky Fromm tried to gun the president down on September 5th. Ford was walking into the state capitol building in Sacramento, California, when Fromm emerged from the crowd, brandishing a pistol, but she had neglected to chamber a round, so whoopsies. Squeaky was squashed to the ground by Secret Service agents as Ford continued inside the building and met with California Governor Jerry Brown as if nothing had happened. Maybe you didn't notice. Nah, you definitely noticed that. The next day, 18-year-old tennis star Martina Navratilova asked for political asylum from communist-controlled Czechoslovakia while competing in the U.S. Open on September 6th. Navratilova had been granted permission to stay in America for the duration of the tournament, but officially defected from her home country the night after she was eliminated from the semifinals. The hot-tempered tennis pro was one of several prominent athletes, artists, entertainers, and others to publicly defect from communist-controlled countries during the Cold War, including gymnast Nadia Comaneci and Detroit Red Wing legend Sergei Fedorov.
Now, the first thing you gotta do is a Vinnie Barbarino look, okay? Your hair, for instance, very casual. It should look like it's being blown by unseen winds.
Just over a week later, Rembrandt's priceless painting, The Night Watch, was badly damaged by a knife-wielding vandal as it hung in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Oh, and we mean priceless, literally. The massive 12 by 14-foot painting has never been assigned a monetary value. The attacker was a former teacher named Wilhelmus de Rijk, who slashed the paintings to ribbons with a bread knife, claiming the Lord had told him to do it. Interestingly, this wasn't the first time that the Night Watch would be randomly attacked by vandals in the 20th century, nor would it be the last. An unemployed shoemaker attempted to deface the painting with a shoemaker's knife in 1911. And we flash forward to April 6, 1990. A man sprayed acid onto the canvas from a pump concealed in his jacket. Luckily, the damage was minimal. Some people really do not like that painting. Coming back to 1975, kidnapping victim turned wanted fugitive Patty Hearst was captured by the FBI in San Francisco on September 18th. Hearst, the granddaughter of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, had been abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army the previous year, who demanded an elaborate ransom for her return. But Hearst appeared to have joined the SLA, releasing a videotaped statement of allegiance and assisting the group in at least 2 armed robberies. Although she later claimed that she had been brainwashed and tormented by her captors, Hearst was convicted for her involvement in the robberies and spent 3 years in prison before her sentence was commuted by President Jimmy Carter in 1979.
Can we help you?
Oh, you speak English?
Of course.
Ah, wonderful, wunderbar.
17 days after Squeaky Fromm's botched attack, President Ford survived a second attempt on his life, when a woman opened fire on him from a crowd gathered outside his hotel in San Francisco. The assailant was a former FBI informant named Sarah Jane Moore, who squeezed off 2 rounds before being subdued by Oliver Sipple, a retired U.S. Marine who happened to be standing near her in the crowd. President Ford escaped unharmed, until his scathing depiction on The Simpsons 2 decades later. Electrifying soul singer Jackie Wilson suffered a massive heart attack in the middle of a performance the following week. Wilson was in the middle of a rendition of his hit song, Lonely Teardrops, at a New Jersey nightclub on September 29th when he suddenly collapsed. The singer lapsed into a 9-year coma, from which he never awakened. Wilson passed away on January 21st, 1984, at the age of 49. Moving into October, and the checking in on sports, Muhammad Ali narrowly defeated rival Joe Frazier in a legendary boxing match. Dubbed the Thriller in Manila by Ali himself, the champ traded blows with Frazier for a brutal 14 rounds in Quezon City in the Philippines. Frazier's face was so swollen he could barely see, and his corner threw in the towel. It was the third and last time these 2 greats would face each other in the ring, Ali taking 2 of those bouts.
We'll be right back.
No pizza lover is going to buy frozen pizza just because it's convenient. That's why Kellogg made their frozen pizza with thick, rich tomato sauce, fresh peppers and mushrooms, spicy pepperoni, and lots of mozzarella cheese.
A week later, President Ford signed a bill authorizing the admission of women to America's military academies. Previously, the nation's service academies had been male only. The bill generated some controversy, though, as women were barred from combat at the time. In fact, women were still prohibited from most combat roles until January of 2013, when Pentagon Defense Secretary Leon Panetta officially lifted the ban. Women would still be restricted from joining special operations units such as Navy SEALs and the Army Special Forces until 2015.
From Saturday Night News headquarters, this is Weekend Update with Chevy Chase.
You under the covers right now? Did you shower? Good evening. I'm Chevy Chase.
Stuntman Evel Knievel did not stay retired for long. Just 5 months after his crash at Wembley Stadium, the legendary Daredevil jumped 14 Greyhound buses at Ohio's Kings Island amusement park, a distance of over 130 feet. And this time, he stuck the landing. It's just too bad he couldn't ride the Beast after his jump. The greatest wooden coaster wouldn't debut for another 4 years.
From New York, Hollywood, the nation, Washington, and the world. Good morning, America.
Punk band The Sex Pistols played their first show on the 6th at the Common Room of London's St. Martin's School of Art. True to their street punk image, the band neglected to bring any equipment and had to borrow amplifiers from the headlining band Bazooka Joe. The show nearly ended in a fistfight when Pistols' lead singer Johnny Rotten started smashing the loaned gear, which, to be honest, is exactly what you'd expect from a guy named Johnny Rotten. There's a reason he was on Judge Judy in the 90s.
Dr. Bleeker, I always wondered when I'd have the displeasure of meeting you.
She knows who we are.
Oh, I've heard of you. But you should have stuck to sabotaging oil tankers.
Jesus, I mean, you guys do nothing but complain about how you can't stand it in this place here, and then you haven't got the guts just to walk out? I mean, what do you think you are, for Christ's sake, crazy or something? Well, you're not.
Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupted on November 29th, triggering a massive earthquake that measured a whopping 7.4 on the Richter scale. In addition to the eruption, the earthquake conjured a 47-foot-high tsunami that was felt as far away as Alaska and Japan. The surf was up indeed. In an odd coincidence, one of the most famous plays in football was born 3 days after Christmas, when Dallas Cowboys quarterback Roger Staubach threw a 50-yard touchdown pass to Drew Pearson in the final 24 seconds of a playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings. The play was dubbed the Hail Mary. And while the term had already been in use in college football, Staubach's impossible game-winning bomb brought the term into the mainstream. Speaking of bombs, an explosive device detonated in a baggage area of LaGuardia Airport 1 day later. The blast tore through the crowded terminal, fatally wounding 11 people and injuring 75 others. Despite being one of the worst terrorist attacks in American history at the time, no group took credit for the bombing, and the incident remains unsolved to this day. And so, 1975 ended on a bittersweet note, with an unforgettable moment of triumph and a shocking and mysterious tragedy. 1976 was just about to roll up to the party, bringing with it a new president, a new gadget, and hey, the Muppets. But that is next year. Coming soon, 1976. So what do you think? What was the biggest moment of 1975? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other timeline videos.